Talk to your daughter. She told me all your shit. And asked around about you. Turns out Kanan ain't the first young boy you've been messing with. But he about to be the last.
So there was always going to be consequences to actions. And were we really surprised Salvacelli wanted Marvin in return for Marco's death? I don't think so. He thought that was fair. But Raq wasn't about to give up her brother. But in typical power fashion, I don't think Marvin's dead. In fact, in this game, innocent and loved ones always find a way to get caught in the crossfire, and that's what I think happened at the end. Jimmy not only missed Raq in episode 5, but I think he missed Marvin as well, and this is going to cause an all-out war with the Italians and the Thomases, because even though we've seen a different side to Marvin in season 2, we're about to see him unleash, especially if Renee got caught in the crossfire. But where this episode centered heavily around Marvin, Duke really did suffer, but something which brought her closer to Marvin, and they're not there yet, but it definitely is a step in the right direction. But on the other hand, a relationship which is definitely going in the opposite direction is Kanan and Raq's. If Kanan had any doubt before, well now he knows the truth, and now he is fully done. So are the walls closing in on Raq towards the end of season 2? We're gonna run through all the events of episode 8 in this breakdown. Now, this episode kicked off with Dominic making it to the hospital, but there was no way he was surviving yet another fuck up, and Sal made sure of that. But at the end of episode 7, we saw Corinne step into Raq about how Palomar slept with Kanan, and so it was no surprise we saw Raq sending a warning shot to Palomar.
Like I said, I don't know what you're talking about.
I heard what you said. But do you hear what I'm saying? Because next time you see me, I ain't gonna be saying shit.
Nah, Raq did do her homework on Palomar, and she found out Kanan wasn't the first young boy she's messed with. And earlier in the week, I mentioned how we're gonna see Raq sending Palomar a real warning shot, and the manner in which she did was very similar to Scrappy. She put a gun to the side of her head, because if you shoot someone from the side, it's easier to make it look like a suicide. So as we're on the topic of Scrappy, we saw Scrappy's mom rolling up on Kanan, and she knows Scrappy's death definitely wasn't a suicide, because she doesn't buy that bullshit. And of course, we all know she's right, but this was the first time Kanan heard a different story, along with being one of Raq's many lies to Kanan. But Scrappy's mom could definitely be a problem for Raq, and she's someone to keep an eye on. Now, as we follow Kanan, he went to Famous's crib, and something both Raq and Kanan mentioned was school. So even though we haven't seen any scenes of them at school in season 2, they are definitely back. But with Famous telling Kanan how Raq stormed in here in the morning, pulling a piece on Palomar, we saw Kanan trying to patch things up, and we learned how Palomar knew who Kanan was from the start, which is why she stepped to him, and it's also why I said we couldn't trust her, because as Scrappy once said, everyone's in the game. But with Famous being famous, he opened the paternity results and read the initials of KS being the son of MH, who of course is Malcolm Howard. But where he thought it was DEFCON, Kanan knew what it really meant, and so when he came to Raq's new house, this was always going to be a bit awkward. Earlier in the season, when Raq brought Kanan back in the mix, she told him no more secrets, but we all know they were both keeping secrets from each other, and this relationship has been on thin ice ever since the start of season 2. But where Kanan questioned Raq about stepping to Palomar, I actually do agree with Raq, because Palomar was wrong for what she did, but Kanan threw it back on Raq, because she did fall pregnant with Kanan at the age of 16. We also heard Kanan mention how Scruff's mom doesn't believe his death was a suicide, and how he needed to clear his head, and clear his head of Raq. And Kanan's clearly had enough of his mom, and as she looked at the empty bed, she knows she's lost him, because the more she lies, the more she's actually pushing him in Howard's direction, which is where he ended up spending the evening. Now, over the course of the past season or so, and mainly season 2, we've seen Duke and Kanan confide in each other, especially about their parents, but every single time we've seen Duke step in and dismiss it, and in essence, take charge of Kanan's thought process, very similar to what we saw in Power.
He's a fucking lying ass cop, Kanan. And that's what cops do. They lie. He's just fucking with your head so we can get a rock. Fuck that cop. Don't listen to him.
But this time, there was clearly a change in Duke's approach. She took a step back and just listened.
Raq love you, Kanan.
But sometimes, I feel like she used that love to do a whole lot of ill shit.
And this relationship between Kanan and Raq really is over, especially after Kanan took some time to look over the paternity results himself. Now, where one relationship is broken beyond repair, we actually find ourselves looking at Duke and Marvin having a real moment for the first time in Raising Kanan. But it all started with some fucked up treatment for Duke from Kenya and those from the church. It seems like Kenya was able to read Duke like a book and knows about her sexuality. And with her being a big churchgoer, this is the issue I raised. Was Kenya gonna accept Duke's sexuality? And the answer was no. But not only did she not accept it, she wanted to brainwash Duke, and the treatment she faced really was painful. The older Kanan's narration also said, "We're all wondering how did Duke get so cold-blooded? It wasn't just one single thing, but shit like this, it would have had Duke for as long as she lived. And the Duke we saw in power really was cold-blooded, someone who felt no pain when it came to death or killing those in her crew, and this was a brutal treatment she'd had to deal with in episode 8, and it's definitely a contributing factor." And Marvin did warn Duke in episode 7, Kenya was on her own shit, always has been and always will be, and so it was no surprise to Marvin when he saw Duke burning the clothes Kenya bought Duke. But this really did rile Marvin up, and where he delivered some home truths to Kenya about how she abandoned her daughter along with sleeping with an NBA player. But as Kenya slapped Marvin, we heard Duke yell out, "Dad," which is the first time we've ever heard Duke call Marvin her dad. But this time it was actually Duke who was leaving Kenya, because she was fine without her before and she'll be fine without her again. But ironically, this was also the start of maybe a relationship with Marvin. We all know that Marvin hasn't been the greatest of fathers to Duke either, but at least Marvin's trying to change. He's been to anger management classes and listened to Renee. He's accepted Duke for who she is, and even though we did hear Duke calling Marvin dad, there is still a lot of shit they need to fix. And even though it's not the right time, Duke definitely recognizes Marvin's trying to change. But I'm sure we all know power by now. They only build these relationships only to then take them away. And just like the older Kanan's narration told us, there's definitely going to be more pain when it comes to Duke. So Marvin's death is one I expect to really hit Duke when this eventually happens. So let's talk about Marvin's troubles with the Italians. So as we circle back around to the beginning of this video, the question was who was going to get to Dominic first. Was it going to be Marvin or Sal Baselli? And even though Unique won Marvin, unfortunately it was Sal who got to Dominic, but not before Unique could start making his own moves, because if he wanted to rat on Marvin, then he could have done it right here, but he didn't, because he's playing the long game of chess. He definitely wants to take back what's his, and with the walls closing in on Raq, if Unique plays his cards right, he could definitely end up season 2 on top. But as Dominic told Sal, it was Marvin who gave Marco the job, and then there was no need for Dominic, and so we saw Jimmy kill Dom. But as the Italians set about their business, Raq learned about the death of Marco Baselli, the son of Sal, and how it was Marvin who gave him the job of killing Tony Deep. And so Sal offered Raq a deal, Marvin's death for Marco's, but there was no way Raq was gonna accept that. Sure, Marvin should never have gone round Sal to make the deal with Marco, but the plan fucked up on complacency and Dominic shooting Marco. But Raq showed this tough exterior, as she always does, because it's what she's always done, being a woman in a man's world. But regardless of whether Raq gave up Marvin or not, Sal was always going to make his move, and this is something I'm sure we all saw coming. Innocent parties always get caught in the crossfire, and ironically, just when things started to go right for Marvin, his world is about to come crashing down once again. Because I don't think Marvin's dead. There is no way Marvin goes out like that. I think episode 9 is when we'll find out Renee was actually caught in the crossfire, but all hell will definitely break loose between the Italians and the Thomases. And as Claudia once told Tommy in Force, chaos creates opportunities, and this chaos will definitely create an opportunity for one man, Unique. Unique is the one we need to watch, because he will definitely be making some chess moves and using this chaos to end season 2 as a kingpin of Southside. Now elsewhere, we saw Lou putting pressure on the DJ they paid to play Ziza's song, and it does seem like Ziza enjoys this shit when Lou gets his hands dirty and brings out the street side. And I do wonder, is there more story to Ziza? But Marco's death wasn't the only death that was brought to light which connected to the Thomas family. There was also Crown, and no doubt, who do you guys think is going to be sniffing around? Detective Beck. Beck is someone who, despite being told by the captain she's on her final warning, we still saw her step to Raq about her relationship with Howard. But the walls also seem to be closing in on Beck from all sorts of different angles. Howard's given her one more chance to leave this shit. Rox left it be for now, but it also seems that the Binghams believe she had something to do with Nicole's death, and from season 1, we learn how they were well connected, and so I do think Beck could end up being a death either in episode 9 or 10. And finally, regardless of the issues surrounding Raq, she's still making her moves to expand, and where Cartier decided to let Abraham rot in a cell, she used her connections to do him a favor, because she wants Cartier's business in DC and Baltimore. But that's a breakdown of episode 8, and one which leaves us with broken relationships with some, but others who are mending theirs, and there are those who are meddling in things they shouldn't be. And no doubt, as we approach episodes 9 and 10, there will definitely be more consequences and death. So will Marvin make it out of season 2 alive? Could we get the introduction to Breeze to finally put the nail in the coffin of Kanan and Raq's relationship? And what happens next with Duke? Because I don't think it's the last we've seen of Kenya. And let's not forget about Unique, who's playing chess while others are playing checkers. So drop all your thoughts down below on all things episode 8. And of course, if you are new to the channel and you haven't done so already, then remember to smash the subscribe button if you want to see everything Power Book 3 and Power Universe related. But as always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.